Coming up on Access San Francisco Channel 29, an interview with KTVU Channel 2 news reporter Rita Williams. Making waves, tomorrow's leaders are the youth of today. And on the women's desk, KALW talk show host and media maven, Farai Chidea.
You're watching a unique alternative news source for the Bay Area. Newsroom on Access SF begins now.
Hi, I'm Amy Alomar, and you're watching Newsroom on Access SF, an independently produced program on public access.
And I'm Noelle Hanrahan. The staff and producers at Access San Francisco came together to record this broadcast on Tuesday, August 10th, 2004. For the next hour, we'll see what the world looks like through the eyes of some of San Francisco's best independent television producers. And now the news headlines. Outsourcing in the San Francisco Fire Department. Critics say that residents of San Francisco may get less and poorer emergency services if a plan to outsource the fire department's paramedics goes through. The outsourcing plan by the fire department comes in the wake of reports by the civil grand jury and the city controller that criticize the 1998 merger of the fire department with EMS services. Currently, 5% of emergency medical calls are contracted out to private companies. Under consideration are 5 different plans to revamp the emergency services unit. Fire Chief Joan Hayes White has called together a group of city agencies that have come up with 2 proposals. One would increase the number of city-run ambulances and paramedics with no private contracting. The alternative would contract out all ambulance work. Now, in the latter case, city employees and paramedics would not lose their jobs. They would remain on the fire engines. Privatizing EMS has been met with some concern. This service often represents the difference between life and death for those in need of emergency care. The debates on outsourcing will continue in what may be a long and heated battle. Now turning to a casualty of the Patriot Act. U.S. political prisoner is an interesting moniker for Sherman Austin, the 20-year-old African-American former webmaster of the anarchist website www.raisethefist.com. He was one of those first casualties of the infamous U.S. Patriot Act. He was recently released from the Federal Corrections Institute in Tucson, Arizona, after a year in federal prison. He was also ordered to pay a $2,000 fine and serve 3 years on probation. He will serve the remainder of this month in custody at a halfway house in Los Angeles. His supervised release on federal probation includes strict limitations on his First Amendment rights. Austin will not be allowed to use or own a computer without the approval of a probation officer. In addition, Austin has been forbidden any contact with any so-called anarchist groups. Now, you might be wondering what Austin did. Well, Austin pleaded guilty to distribution of information about making or using explosives. But what did he actually do? He hosted a website, and he published a newswire that allows users to submit text and photographs that instantly appear on the newswire at the push of a button. Well, additionally, he provided free web storage space. Now, a 2002 FBI report and interview documents that it was an affluent Orange County white teenager who wrote the material and uploaded it to Austin's site. That youth was never charged. By now you might be asking why Sherman Austin pled guilty. He was facing a 20-year sentence enhancement if convicted under the 2001 U.S. Patriot Act. And in another incident from our War on Civil Liberties, here's an update on Captain James Yee. The Army Muslim chaplain was falsely charged on October 10, 2003. He's resigned from the Army, now effective in January, ending a once promising military career that was shattered when he was accused of espionage while ministering to Islamic prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. Quote, in 2003, I was unfairly accused of grave offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and unjustifiably placed in solitary confinement for 76 days, quotes Yi from a letter, his resignation letter. Yi was returned to his home base at Fort Lewis after the charges were dropped earlier this year. He was ordered not to say anything negative about the Army. Those orders, he wrote, have hurt his ability to defend himself and to, quote, clear his name, and it actually chills his free speech. You're watching Newsroom on Access San Francisco. Now, another segment. In keeping with our political coverage in this big election year, we will be talking with some of the people running for office in November. This year, many of the seats on the Board of Supervisors will be up for election. And thanks to district elections, many ordinary citizens, even those without much money, are throwing their hats into the ring to challenge incumbents or to run for open seats. One of those people is Renee Salcedo, who's currently running for the District 9 seat that's being held by Supervisor Tom Amiano. Renee is a staff attorney and director of the San Francisco Day Labor Program. In tonight's newsroom interview, producer Margaret Halkin talks with Renee Salcedo about a run for office and some of the pressing issues facing the residents of District 9.
Thank you, Noel. I'm Margaret Halkin, and I'm sitting here with Renee Salcedo, who is running for supervisor in District 9 of San Francisco. Renee, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Margaret. A pleasure being here.
It's great to have you here. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what has brought you here and why you're running for supervisor and a little bit about your background. And
Sure. I'm a native San Franciscan. I'm a third-generation Mission District resident. I went to school, in college and law school over at Berkeley. And for the past 15 years, I've been working in the neighborhood trenches, working for a nonprofit called La Raza Centro Legal, the San Francisco Day Labor Program, the Northern California Coalition for Immigrant Rights, and you name it, I've done it. I've worked as an organizer, community activist, as an attorney, working on worker rights and labor rights, women's rights, immigrant rights, homeless rights. I've been working with real people who live in our neighborhood. Some of the accomplishments over the past 15 years, which is how long I've been doing this kind of work, includes I helped create the San Francisco Immigrant Rights Commission and served as its first chair for the first 4 years. I was instrumental in passing legislation at the school board level that prohibited law enforcement from getting involved in day-to-day disciplinary matters so that we don't unnecessarily criminalize young people, children. And I've been involved in a slew of policies. I helped pass the new increase of the minimum wage in San Francisco. I'm very proud of that. We have a new minimum wage in San Francisco thanks to our hard work. So
what is the new minimum wage in
It's
San
$8.50 an hour now,
From?
actually, yeah, from $6.75.
Very nice.
So it's a step in the right direction. It's not quite enough, but it definitely is a step in the right direction because obviously working families in San Francisco can't even afford to live here anymore.
Yes, it's very expensive here.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell everybody where District 9 is? Like, what area does that cover in San Francisco?
District 9 is the Mission, Bernal Heights, and Portola areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as you're running for supervisor, I know that you have definitely been involved in a lot of activities. What do you find to be the most pressing issues for all San Franciscos? Not just people who live in District 9, but for everyone who lives in San Francisco.
One of the main reasons, Margaret, that I decided to run is because last year I participated in a community surveying process. And we tabled out on street corners, we went door to door, and we asked folks who live in my neighborhood and in the district, what are the issues that you care about? And surprisingly enough, most people we talked to didn't feel vested in participating in the political process, didn't feel like they had a voice in City Hall. And I think that's unacceptable. I think that people in District 9, as in all districts in San Francisco, deserve to be active participants in policies that impact all of us. So the main issues that came out of that survey process, including the availability of dignified, affordable housing, not just any housing. It has to be quality housing, including for people who are low income. It included living wage jobs, again, not just any jobs, but jobs that people can survive on while living in San Francisco because the rents are so high. Healthy and clean neighborhoods. And then the final issue was healthy options for youth. You know, a lot of people these days are complaining about youth violence and the shootings going on in our neighborhoods. But the problem is that we're not investing the resources sufficiently in order to address prevention and intervention with our young people. So those are the issues that are important to the people in District 9, in my district, and I think that it's a reflection of the issues that people care about citywide.
And when you talk about investing in the youth, what exactly does that mean? Because, you know, people look at that and say, oh, you know, another program. You know, what does that mean to you? What are your ideas for investing in the youth?
Well, it does mean money. It means having the right political priorities when it comes to budget time every year at City Hall, and it means adequately funding the services and the work that is happening on the ground level, because I'll tell you, people who are working in the trenches know what the real solutions are. The long-term root causes addressing solutions that we need to focus on. It may not happen that we address the solutions from one day to the next, but we need to make sure that money is spent in that way rather than in an unnecessary and wasteful way.
And are you talking about monies solely from the citizens, or are there other ways to get money to help the youth and help people who are in need?
One of my top priorities as supervisor of District 9 will be to make sure that the wealthiest in San Francisco, mainly the downtown businesses, pay their fair share. I don't think it's fair, for example, that the Board of Supervisors, this previous budget process, is requiring through a sales tax, which is regressive, requiring low-income and middle-income people to pay for our budget deficit. It's not fair that that is happening while at the same time there are large corporations like PG&E, which is paying a fee that dates back to the 1930s, or paying taxes that are outdated and aren't up to the level where they should be. And that's one thing that distinguishes me from the incumbent currently in District 9, that I will fight hard to make sure that the wealthiest in San Francisco pay their fair share so that the most vulnerable don't have to suffer and the budget isn't balanced on their backs.
And this would create a nice balance within the community.
Absolutely. It will create a balance in the level of resources that we have to be able to allocate them fairly. We need that kind of balance because right now in San Francisco, it's pretty tragic. We have the very wealthy and we have people who are living month to month who can't pay rent. Right now, the jobless rate is way up. And we have to make sure, as part of city government, to be responsible to those communities who right now need some assistance.
Renee, why don't you tell us the one thing that you would like people to know the most about you and what you really want to accomplish with your winning the election?
I have a history of being effective. I have a history of achieving concrete results. Some of them I mentioned earlier during this interview. I have a reputation of standing for principal positions courageously, and I think that's the kind of person we need on the Board of Supervisors right now, particularly now that we have this deficit, the budget deficit. We have an economic crisis with monies not coming down from the federal and the state governments. We need representatives on the Board of Supervisors who are willing to fight for our folks, who are willing to fight for tenant rights, who are willing to fight to make sure that the most oppressed sectors of our community are not criminalized and have access to adequate and dignified services and opportunities. And if you also believe in that, you should vote for me, Supervisor in District 9.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to meet with you and a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you all the best of luck in your election.
Thank you, Margaret. For more information, people can look at my website, which is reneesaucedo.com.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much, and you are watching Newsroom on Access SF.
Penn Women Presents is an arts outreach program of the National League of American Penn Women, Nob Hill, San Francisco Bay Area branch. NLAPW is an organization of professional writers, artists, and composers founded in Washington, D.C. over 100 years ago. In this segment, directed by Wayne McIntosh, Eileen Malone, president of the Nob Hill, San Francisco branch, interviews Rita Williams, KTVU news reporter, as she chats informally about her life as a television reporter.
Your work is very time-consuming. You go to work at what time?
10 to 10:30 in the morning, and I'm usually home by 10 at night, if I'm lucky.
If you're lucky.
If I'm lucky. But I commute about 45 minutes each way, so that's in there too. But they're long days. And I pretty much, during the week, Monday through Friday, and luckily I'm senior enough now that I work Monday through Friday and I work days, that I have my weekends for my family.
Well, you have your weekends for your family, but I happen to know that you spend some of your weekends doing outreach work into the community, because that's how we met, isn't it?
That's true. We had a great time together.
How did we meet?
We were auctioneers for a fundraiser for, it's called OICW, which is on O'Brien and East Menlo Park. And this is a group, it actually stands for Opportunities Industrialization Centers West, and has a long history. I've done a story on it in its past. It was started in the 60s back east by a minister, a black minister, who wanted to have this kind of, not give money to people, but to teach them a skill, teach them
To make good money.
Exactly, exactly. And they have just worked miracles. And it's one of those programs that I just sort of found out about and in doing stories, and love to support a group like that.
And so both of us ended up on this telethon.
Yes.
Working side by side.
Well, let's tell the truth. You were supposed to have a co-anchor who didn't show up, and so they asked me if I'd stay for my 3rd hour in a row to keep hosting the telethon with you, and I said yes, because you were so much fun. So we spent an hour in front of people and really had a good time.
And that's the fun thing that we talked about too, because you said so seldom do your viewers get to see you laughing or being, and you are fun. I know you are.
Well, thank you. It's nice to know.
But you do hard news, and you're not going to
Right.
get up there and start giggling about, you know, somebody just got shot on the freeway. So
Right.
you're going to have this. So you get to laugh all you want on this show.
Well, a couple funny things about that. You know, I think I told you that a viewer wrote once and said I was about the only reporter who didn't seem to laugh and have fun with the anchors on the show. And my son, who was only about 7 at the time, said, "Mom, what are you supposed to do? Laugh when you talk about somebody dying or something?" I don't know what people think you should do sometimes, but
I don't either. I don't either.
But no, I'm somber, just like Dennis Richmond. Dennis is a great, fun guy, but you rarely see Dennis laughing on the air because he's doing straight news, and that's what we try to do at Channel 2. And the morning show, you can have a little bit more fun, and it's a little lighter than it is at night. But when you're doing terrible news, sometimes you can't laugh.
But I do like the fact that you walk the talk. I mean, you have a sense of the stories that you tell. You care about them. You're not doing it to fluff or entertain. You have a purpose. There's always a meaning behind what you do. One of our crew members, Cheryl, said to you as soon as she saw you, she said, "Oh, I love you. You always write wonderful things about women."
Well, and see, I didn't realize that I do that many stories about women. I guess I do everything, but I, you know, I realize now I've been doing this 30 years, and when I think back how there were no mentors or no women on the air that I could want to be like.
So you're a pioneer.
I guess we are. I have to tell you a quick, real funny story at San Jose State about 8 years ago. There, I was doing a story, and there was a kid who was a freshman journalism student, and he came up to me and said, "Oh, it's such an honor to meet you. I've been watching you all my life." And I thought, all his life? What is he talking about? And then I realized the kid's like 18 years old. I've been on the air here 27, 8 years or something. Of course, he has been watching all my life. But it gives you some idea of just how long you've been doing this. And I think it's great if I've been a good role model for women, because it hasn't been easy. And it is easier now for women in this business. And you know, we have a lot of battle scars and a lot of blood in my back from being backstabbed or some of the problems that you had going through this. I was the first woman on our air to have a baby, and they didn't know how to shoot me, you know, and they got closer and closer to my face.
Because they didn't want pregnancy
to show.
and
So it wasn't part of the story. And so one of the last stories I did before I left was working on Labor Day in September.
Working on Labor Day.
And I decided it was kind of a feature, so at the end I did a stand-up, and I had the cameraman. It was one of my sweet dear friends, Belva Davis's husband. And so Bill started, I said, "Start on me tight on my face." And so I said, "I don't know why I'm thinking about this today. Maybe because this is a good place to be on Labor Day." And we pulled out, and I was in a labor and delivery room, and I was 9 months pregnant. And so I just kind of laughed, and that was the end of the story. And that's the only time that we ever acknowledged that I was pregnant on the air. And it was a light enough story that I could kind of do it
And
with.
now they're posing naked on covers of magazines.
Oh, yeah, but back then it was a dirty word, you know. You're pregnant. You can't be pregnant. Women can't do this job and be pregnant.
Farai Chidea is a multimedia journalist who has worked in print, radio, television, and online. She hosts Your Call Radio on San Francisco's KALW 91.7 FM. In conjunction with San Francisco State University, she is relaunching Pop and Politics, an online journal of news and opinion founded in 1995. Chidea has been a correspondent for ABC News, anchored the primetime program Pure Oxygen, and contributed commentaries to CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and BET. In 1997, Newsweek named her to its Century Club of 100 People to Watch. She has published 3 books: Don't Believe the Hype, Fighting Cultural Misinformation About African Americans, The Color of Our Future, and her latest book is called Trust, Reaching the 100 Million Missing Voters. On tonight's Women's Desk, Noelle Hanrahan talks with Farai about women in the media.
Thank you, Amy. This is the Women's Desk on Newsroom, and I'm Noelle Hanrahan. I'm pleased to be joined by Farai Chidea. She's the host of Your Call Radio on KALW. That's 91.7 FM in San Francisco, can be heard around the country. She's also an author, and she's just back from the Unity Conference in Washington, D.C. Tell us what the Unity Conference is about and why it's so important.
Well, Unity is something that happens every 4 years. It's a gathering of the Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American journalist associations. And this one was the largest ever gathering of news professionals in the States. 7,000 people, mainly journalists of color, mainly from the U.S., but some from other parts of the world. And because there was this huge and influential audience, President Bush came, Senator Kerry came, Colin Powell came, and they addressed people there trying to impress them, and frankly, the president didn't do a very good job.
Well, how did the president do? This was a format where news journalists could ask him questions, and I've heard that he's somewhat secretive. And so how did that work on the floor?
Well, you know, it was interesting because a lot of the people, even people from the Washington Press Corps, the few people of color who are in the Washington Press Corps, don't get particularly good access to the president. He You know, Clinton is a schmoozer, for example. He had a fairly open White House in terms of allowing journalist access. Bush and the administration are very different. So he seemed kind of flustered by the fact that he had journalists who were going to press him on tough questions. For example, you had someone pressing him on affirmative action, whether they should end legacy admissions, and he fumbled the answer. He was asked about tribal sovereignty. He had no idea, apparently, what it was. He was asked to put a timeline on the U.S. engagement in Iraq, and he got actually very angry there. It was interesting to see, because he just sort of said, I'm not going to fall into this trap, you know, you want to make me say a date, and then when I break it, you'll say, aha, you know, so he sort of kind of broke character there.
So tell me, with 7,000 journalists representing people of color in the United States and journalists, how has that really changed the last number of years? And I'm really curious about the power that represents, yet the changes that haven't truly happened in this country.
Well, you know, one of the things that I think is interesting is that also when you have a conference like this, you begin to see the distinctions between different types of journalists. I have worked in print, TV, radio, online, and you can spot a television journalist a mile away. They're wearing, you know, if it's a woman, high heels, you know, perfect little suit, makeup, and they're all going around to the job booths sort of in an audition, almost like an actorly audition. And the print journalists are all, you know, with like rumpled shirts and whatever. And so I think that what's interesting is that there's a lot more visual diversity in the ranks of the television correspondents, because there's a need to have faces that look like they represent the whole community. When you start talking about the ranks of editors, when you start talking about magazines, when you start talking about newspapers, the diversity thins out. And it's a fairly damning commentary on how the business is run, where we have one kind of face of what the industry is doing and promoting diversity, and then when you just take one step back into the managerial ranks, you have a very different picture.
You know, I was even reading an article today by Cynthia Tucker saying that the Southern Conference, Christian Leadership Conference was irrelevant, and that racism really doesn't exist in the same form in this country as it used to. And I found that really shocking. I mean, I found that level of analysis that she could, given all of what we know about the disparate income, about the disparate education, about who's incarcerated in this country, that there could be pundits who would say that.
You know, I haven't read the column. I like a lot of the stuff that she writes, and I'm surprised. I haven't seen it myself. What I don't know whether this is what she was saying, but I've been writing recently about the hip-hop generation activism. And what I thought was interesting, sort of, you know, tying it back into the Unity Conference, is that one reason that Bush showed up was because he didn't go to the NAACP convention. He didn't go, and there was a big stink made about it. But to be honest, the NAACP voters are certainly not irrelevant, far from it. But they're stable voters. They're going to go to the polls anyway. There's a whole other cohort of people who were younger, who aren't tied into traditional civil rights organizations. And they're actually in play. You know, the Republicans are probably not going to get very many of their votes this year, but they're not trying. And I actually think that this younger generation of African Americans is much more politically in play. So I can't comment on the article that I haven't read, but what I think is interesting is that traditional civil rights organizations are very good at getting out their constituency, but there's a whole other group of people who are young people of color who don't relate to the civil rights generation mentality at all.
That's what your new book is about, really the 100 million missing voters. And talk a little bit about that. Where do you see those voters coming from, and who are they? Right.
Well, the book is called Trust, and it's really, it's a look at, you know, we are obsessed with, you know, the you know, kind of one-on-one competition that happens in a presidential who don't participate. And 100 million people this year might not even vote. You know, you've got roughly 22 million single women who are likely non-voters. You have younger people, poor people and working class people, people of color who are, you know, kind of clustered in this group of people who are not really solicited by either of the two major parties to participate. And a lot of people sort of feel like, well, if I'm not asked to the dance, I'm not going to go. Some people kind of storm the polls, even if their vote isn't wanted. Other people just sort of sit back, and it really is about the interaction between our two-party system and the voters out there.
What was your original title, and what was the title that you ended up having? I know the original title had a hope in it, and why is that?
Wow, I went through like 3 titles, so I can't even remember what my my first title was, you know, to be perfectly honest. But the reason that I called it trust in the end was because I feel that the essential problem in our democracy is a lack of trust in participation. What I mean by that is, if you're a citizen in a country, you may not always get what you want, but you have to trust the government and say that my vote will be counted. And there was a real break of trust in the 2000 election. People not only thought, well, whatever I vote for may not pass, whoever I vote for may not win, but my vote might not even be counted. And why should you participate in a system that's that fundamentally flawed?
Well, this is certainly going to be an exciting couple of months as we lead up to the election. So thanks for your participation on the show on the Women's Desk. And this has been the Women's Desk on Access San Francisco Newsroom, and I'm Noelle Hanrahan.
SEIU and its signature campaign, Justice for Janitors, is one of the fastest growing unions in the country. SEIU has 1.6 million members, and it is on the leading edge of the epic struggle for living wages and health care for millions of American workers. Yet its drive to organize San Francisco janitors might just have hit a roadblock. On August 5th, SEIU Local 1877 faced a decertification fight. The question was, which union will represent over 2,000 of San Francisco's janitors who work for 6 companies at 250 job sites, many of which are downtown? The contest pitted former organizers of Local 87 against the statewide local SEIU 1877. In 2002, Local 87 was put into trusteeship and merged with 1877. Initial results of the decertification vote indicate a defeat for SEIU and a victory by USWD, or United Workers for Democracy, an independent union. SEIU is contesting the results of the election and notes that the NLRB has not yet certified the election. Allegations by janitors of election fraud and intimidation are being documented and investigated. San Franciscans are urged to contact the Board of Supervisors to obtain a financial breakdown and detailed explanation of the digging in the once pristine Islas Creek. The creek runs south of Cesar Chavez Street and divides Bayview Hunters Point from Potrero. This request by the Hunters Point Shipyard Citizens Advisory Committee, Community First Coalition, and other community groups alleges that Muni drilled under the creek, causing the Department of Public Works main sewage line to collapse. Nearly 30% of the park was excavated and the habitat of the Pacific chorus frog severely compromised. Activists are worried that DPW's scheduled repairs for later this month may destroy the creek further. Muni's drilling project sought to provide electrical transmission lines for PG&E. In a filing with the California Public Utilities Commission last May, PG&E condemned the drilling by Muni, stating that its own engineering analysis showed that the soils under Islas Creek are unstable and may liquefy during an earthquake. Alternative solutions to this environmental disaster are being reviewed by the city. Repairs may well cost taxpayers millions of dollars as well. You're watching Newsroom on Access SF. Making Waves, a program of the Branson School, works to encourage and prepare elementary and middle school students with limited educational opportunities to enter and succeed in college preparatory classes in middle and high school. The program also works to encourage and prepare young people of color in high school and college to become educators and to gain experience in the teaching profession. Making Waves has for the past 4 years used hip-hop as a tool to provide academic and enrichment services. This year's summit was held at San Francisco State, and 2 of the participants took the time to explain its usefulness.
What's up? I'm Fernando Boville.
And I'm Nocturne.
Yo, and we're here at the Youth Empowerment Summit at San Francisco State University.
Both Fernando and I are in a program called Making Waves, and we're students in high schools, and we're in another program called Making Waves, which is in 9 different high schools in Marin County.
In the Bay Area.
In the Bay Area, and there's also Making Waves in East Bay, and then we were in the North Bay, or we're in the Ramey area. And
Well, yeah, so like I said, we're here at the Youth Empowerment Summit Conference. You know, what we're trying to do is have all the organizations for the youth, you know what I'm saying, to come to our conference, you know, let it be known that we're here, you know, that we could all, you know, see what's up with each other, you know. And we just basically trying to utilize hip-hop and put it into our education, you know what I'm saying? So it's a tool that we can use to educate the youth, and so the youth can use their own opinions, you know, and they can voice their voice.
And making waves and Copay for sponsoring us this conference, also other organizations like Youth Speaks, Youth Empowerment, Empowering You, and Youth Just Think, and other youth organizations to go with the hip hop in the schools movement. And
it's a movement, it's a whole movement. We want everybody to come, everybody's invited. You know, the people from the neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? You want your voice out here, you know, you at the right place. You come to our conference, you come to our summit, you know, right here. You know, this is the place where we got spoken word, we got DJ, we got, what else do we got?
We have Unlearning Sexism,
we got 50 years of history.
500 years of Cortez, Columbus, and Hawkins, which is a history of slavery, or slavery and colonialism. And we also have oral, or spoken word.
We got spoken word, you know, cats go up there and they just go up there, you know, they express their thoughts through poetry, you know, taking care of, you know, standing up, you know, because, you know, they say we're the future, but we also deserve the present, you know, so that's something we're doing right now. We're trying to make a stand, make our voices heard, you know, all across the Bay Area. We're trying to take this nationwide, y'all, you know. The thing, we having workshops. See, Youth Speaks is having a spoken words workshop, which is basically, you know, writing poetry or something, you know, or people performing. And then we have the Huckleberry Teen Youth Program that's coming through, and then doing the Unlearning Sexism workshop, which is basically, you know, educating the youth about, like, basically unlearning sexism, you know.
It's about the sex. It's mostly focusing on women and how the status of women in society, and how it's related to the men's status in society.
Yeah, you know, social injustice. That's what, you know, what Making Waves, or Club Wave of Making Waves focuses on a lot. You know, social injustice. You know, things that are right in the community. You know, we try to make that better change, so we can come and, you know, like, so we can make that better change in the community. And like make things better for all of us, you know what I'm saying?
We all organized it. We fundraised about $1,000 for the food, and the materials that are used in the workshops and the food that you see on the tables.
So any youth, you know what I'm saying, that y'all want to come through and do your thing, you know what I'm saying, do your thing, come out here, get your voice heard. This is the place to be, you know, get at them. We're in County, y'all got it in the East Bay, y'all got it in the North Bay, in the South Bay, it's everywhere, you know what I'm saying? So come and holler at us, you know, or we will be holding this conference next year around the same time. Y'all come holler at us back then, you know.
People, so next year it's going to be even bigger than this.
Yeah, beware, we're grown. Trust that, we're grown, you know what I'm saying? We're trying to make this huge, you know, not only the Bay Area, we try to spread it all California and out to, you know what I'm saying, the east of the United States. So that's what we're trying to do, you know, we're just trying to spread the word, that's what y'all need to do. Y'all need to come down, you know what I'm saying? It's off the hook right now. You know, we got a ton of conferences, different times, you know, we are here in San Francisco State. It's all good. Well, we got a website. And
we have a website, www.renzen.org/makingwaves. We also have radio announcements. This year we've had radios about Family Yell, and CMC also did it.
What was the website? Make it clear. www.branson.org/makingwaves. Okay, that's it. You know, make it clear. You know, we here. So it's basically that's it. You know, Youth Empowerment Summit. Be there.
You have the right to remain silent. Now that's the beginning of the Miranda instruction, the 1966 U.S. Supreme Court decision, which created language that police were required to use before they arrested and questioned folks. It seeped into our cultural consciousness because we saw it on Dragnet and on America's Most Wanted. Now generally, we expect to hear these words before police throw the cuffs on us and arrest us. But just what does it mean, and what rights do we really have? Recent decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court has given the police expanded powers to interrogate people and make arrests. Rights and responsibilities that we once thought automatic aren't so clear-cut anymore. In tonight's Newsroom Forum, producer Meg Dixit talks with attorney Javier Baeza. Javier is here for informational purposes only and not to give legal counsel, but he does have some important advice.
Thanks, Noel. 59-year-old Dudley Heibel was arrested in his hometown of Winnemucca, Nevada, 4 years ago. His crime was failing to show an ID to a police officer. This violated Nevada's Stop and Identify law. Well, Heibel challenged his conviction all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, saying that it violated his Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights in regards to self-incrimination. But last June, the U.S. Supreme Court held that his conviction did not, in fact, violate those rights. Well, how does this ruling affect us here in our hometown, San Francisco? Well, we're governed here in California by the Terry Stop, which is similar to Nevada's Stop and Identify law. So here with me to explain how this affects all of us is my guest, San Francisco criminal attorney Javier Baeza. Hi, Javier. Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mac.
So why don't you give us an overview of the Terry Stop?
Well, the Terry Stop comes from the case of Terry versus Ohio, which was decided by the United States Supreme Court in 1968. And what happened in that case was that an officer was observing three men. He approached these three men, even though they hadn't done anything. He explained that it was based on his training and experience. He felt that they were going to do something. When he approached them, the first one he talked to was Mr. Terry. And based on Mr. Terry's actions at that point, he grabs him, turns him around so that he's now behind him. He separated him from the other two gentlemen. He pats him down, which is just like it says. You pat down where somebody could be holding a weapon. And he feels a weapon. Based on that, he then proceeded to search further and found a weapon on the second gentleman. And that whole case kind of turned on whether or not the officer could state specific and articulable facts based with a rational inference, and whether that justified the intrusion on the right of the men to not be approached by a police officer.
I see. Well, I know that in San Francisco we have the Ramey Warrant as well as the popular Miranda rights that govern the country. How do these three play together, or are they related to each other in any way?
Well, Miranda is, if you look at the entire process as kind of a continuum, Terry deals with the stop, an officer approaching you. Miranda, obviously you always have the Miranda rights, but the entire investigation turns on when you are informed of those rights. So after you've been stopped by an officer, and this is where the Heibel case comes in, after you've been stopped by an officer, you obviously have the right to remain silent. But over the years, the Supreme Court, of course, has whittled that down to where you now have to give certain information, and in fact, you can be forced to give a fingerprint or handwriting sample, because those cases have all been decided where the officers do have authority that you're not incriminating yourself. And that's how they're all connected. The Ramey warrant issue is a big issue here in San Francisco, because there's a kind of a battle going on between the police department and the DA's office.
Yes, exactly.
And Ramey, the Ramey warrant is kind of a lower level of warrant in order to arrest a suspect, whereas police officers traditionally in this city and around the country arrest a suspect when they feel that the investigation has reached a point where there's enough evidence that it carries them beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the level that a jury must find in order to find guilt. So what an officer, by reaching that level, you pretty much are assured at a guilty verdict in trial. So obviously it's a higher level. The Ramey warrant, however, allows the officer to arrest the suspect when there's only a reasonable probable cause. And that's a little lower level. And so that's the battle that's going on right now. And so that's not really related to Terry, so to speak, but altogether, yes, within the criminal procedure area of criminal law, they are all cogs within the same system.
Yes, well, it's easy to get kind of mixed up in what is what. So how, especially with the way the general news media had reported on the Heibel case, what were your thoughts on that?
I'm glad you asked that question, because Heibel, the way it was reported in the mainstream media, was completely misled the public. I was listening, like everyone, I listen to the news, I read the paper, and obviously look in the internet, and they all seem to say the same thing, that the Supreme Court had said in Heibel that an officer could now approach anyone, any adult in public, and just go up to them and ask them their name.
Yes, it did create quite a chaos in the streets.
Right, and that's why the independent media, it's very important to get the word out to the community that that's not the case. You are still protected here in California. Heibel pretty much was confined to the specifics of Nevada, but it does, however, give the authority to approach people and ask their name.
Right, it makes it a little bit more liberal for the authorities.
Exactly.
Now, where can people of color who might be more subject to this type of stoppages go for more information so they can educate themselves about how the Terry stop and other laws can actually protect them?
Well, that's, again, a very important situation, because what you have is you have Terry can be used in a convoluted logical way to allow for things like racial profiling. So it's very important that the community, that young people, people of color, women, educate themselves. The Supreme Court has its own website. The state of California has a website, the city of San Francisco. These websites, what they do is you can read the laws for yourselves. You can go to community organizations, the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, Centro de la Raza Legal here in San Francisco. All these organizations, League of Women's Voters, do a very good job of educating the public with respect to the law.
Well, that's good to know. And Javier, I wanted to ask you, what made you decide to get into criminal law as opposed to the other specialties in the legal field?
Well, actually, a couple things. But one of the things was that I as a child, I was raised by parents who believed very much in what President John F. Kennedy said when he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And they raised me and my brothers and sisters to think along those lines. So I felt that giving back to the community, giving back to my country, I'm doing my role as a criminal defense attorney by challenging the government's authorities to approach us as citizens. And I think we all of us have, as citizens of the greatest country on earth, we have rights and privileges, but that also comes with duties and obligations. And those duties and obligations are to be the best citizens we can be, to keep informed about what the laws are, to keep informed about what our politicians are doing, and to create those checks and balances, because that's the way we keep this country strong.
Well, that's wonderful. If you were a poet, I'd say publish it, but you're an attorney, so I'm a little surprised, but you can still publish that. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, I thank you for joining us today and helping to clarify some of these issues. I hope you come back again soon.
Thank you, Meg.
And I'm Meg Dixit, thanking you for joining me in this segment. And now, back to the regular news. You're watching Newsroom on Access SF.
Recently, the San Francisco Bay Guardian held its Local Heroes Award reception. Local heroes are folks who've taken risks, given their time and energy, donated their skills to significantly improve and change the San Francisco Bay Area, making it a better place for all of us who live here and work here. We caught up with some of these heroes at the party given in their honor. Let's see just what makes them special.
Best of the Bay for 30 years. The idea is pick out little things that help make San Francisco the greatest city in the world.
Hi. We're very excited and kind of out of words about being here today as local heroes in San Francisco for social work for families whose loved ones have been disabled here by law enforcement. But I really want to say that in my heart, the reason for the confusion is that we're all the local heroes. All of us who have been negatively impacted by law enforcement, all the families who are bravely fighting for social justice locally in San Francisco and all across this nation. Those are the heroes. So we're kind of an earmark and we're very honored to be. And it ain't over. I can't even say it. It ain't over. We're going to continue fighting for the people.
Hi, my name is Sandra Juanita Cooper. And I just want to ditto the fact that we have been saying that we're honored to be considered local heroes, but we feel that all of us are local heroes, including you as the camera. When you're doing community work, we are all heroes in our community. And we've been doing this work. Misha started this work right after Idris's death, and he was murdered. After he was murdered. And from that point, we've been working together for a year, since August. And we will continue to work. We want to continue to work, but we also need to say that we cannot let this die. We're working with families, and more mentally ill black men are being killed. Most recently, Cameron Boyd. We have to continue. Physically disabled, mentally disabled, black men are being killed in our city, a city that people come to travel to see from across the world. And we want this city to be the city across the world that says that we work together as a community with our police department, our governments, and we're all one. That's the legacy that we want San Francisco to have.
So we can finally be part of our city, which we are not quite yet. It's on the way.
Thank you.
Okay, we're here at the Best Bay Local Hero Party, but still here, waiting to hear from Judge Warrant. We're referring to as Judge Godot because it's like waiting for Godot, waiting to hear from this guy. He was supposed to rule soon after the hearing on May 12th to let us know what's happening in Golden Gate Park. So if the design of the garage is illegal, as he told us it is, at least we can go to the next step and appeal it or object or do whatever we need to do to exercise our rights and be able to take it to the next level of opposition.
Upcoming book, the new topic book, When Someone You Love Is Kinky, and soon to be released, Radical Ecstasy. So basically, I write books about really outlandish sex. And I provide therapy to people from the margins, okay? I mean, that sounds like so far out, but it's actually very serious. It's like people from the world I live in can't find therapists who don't think that their lifestyles are pathology of some sort. So I get a lot of refugees of people who come to see me because they want therapy, they want to do couples counseling or individual therapy, and they don't want to be judged for their sexual lifestyle, and that's what I do.
Well, I am just into enjoying life for all the great adventures that I can find. I just got back from China and had a wonderful experience there. And tonight I'm here enjoying what's wonderful about the Best of the Bay and accompanying my fabulous friend here and enjoying her glory.
This is the 30th anniversary that we've been doing Best of the Bay. It's a great party. Everyone who's anyone in San Francisco is here. We're all having a great time. This is a celebration of what makes San Francisco special. It's also, part of what we do is we celebrate local heroes, people, unsung heroes who've really worked to make the community a better place. A lot of people are here tonight. We got everybody lined up in front of the pool and got their picture. And I think this is the best Best of the Bay party we've ever done.
I'm Sherman. We're in a band called Specialties. We just won the best girl band in the Best of the Bay Awards at the Bay Area about it. And having a good time. Yes, having a great time. So there you go. All right, everybody smile. This is it. This is the Best of the Bay winner's photo. We're just going to take a few frames here. Everybody look up. Look up at Fred and smile. Say cheese. Say cheesecake. Say banana. Say Golden Gate Park. Hold on, everybody. We're going to do one more quick shot.
I'm Amy Goodman, host of Democracy Now! This is Newsroom on Access SF, a uniquely alternative perspective, here on Public Access Television, Channel 29.
I'm Amy Alomar, and thank you to the producers and staff who helped make this show possible.
And I'm Noelle Hanrahan. And thank you, the audience, for watching Newsroom on Access SF.
When I fall asleep, oh no, babe, oh, nowadays I don't know what to believe. The papers seem so crazy. Even my eyes can't believe what they see on the evening news. The guys in the coffee shop, the man on the corner, everyone's got something to say. Yeah, everyone's got an opinion, but what are they really saying? Do they know what they're feeling? Oh, how times have changed. It's not always so quiet in the morning, and I'm not always at peace when I fall asleep. Oh no, babe.